Welcome to the Warrnambool Library and our Expand Your Mind public lecture series. Tonight we're welcoming a diverse panel with a common interest. The so-called fast fashion industry is responsible for millions of tonnes of waste every year. The problem can seem overwhelming, and it can be difficult to know how our actions as individuals and as a community can make an impact. Our panel tonight are here to discuss these issues from their different perspectives and to talk about what we can do to embrace a more sustainable way of consuming and using fashion and textiles. Please join me in welcoming our presenter and moderator for this evening, Katrina Nash from A Fitting Connection. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everybody. I thought we'd just start with introducing ourselves first. We'll start down the end. We've got Anne. She's an artist and designer and Fabric of Life Festival coordinator.
Hello. Is it working? Yes, I suppose I'm here for a couple of reasons, but one of the main things that is pertinent to the topic is that nearly 7 years ago I decided that I wouldn't buy any new clothing, and other than from an op shop. So I have survived on buying no new clothing for almost 7 years. And here I am. I also upcycle and do, printing on clothing that I buy from the op shop, and sometimes alter them to suit my styling. Last year, through the F project, I came up with the idea of sort of honouring the Fletcher Jones family and what they meant to Warrnambool back in the earlier days. And they were really the bread and butter and the fabric of life of many families in Warrnambool. So I came up with the idea for the Fabric of Life Festival, where we showcased garments and creations, wearable art made from anything recycled, upcycled, anything old. And we had a wonderful day in October where we had 40 garments from local people and some students from South Australia, and they wowed the audience. And hopefully we'll do the same this year in October when we run the festival again.
Sounds wonderful. Anne, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background in business?
So my name's Kylie. I'm the founder of Palmer Towel Co. Our brand is a family brand, and it was born during COVID. So the backstory is that I'm an emergency nurse at the hospital, and COVID was obviously tough on everybody, but I think a lot of healthcare staff are pretty burnt out. And I really wanted to embrace my creative side again, which is something that I really enjoyed doing when I was younger, but as I grew older, kind of lost that a little bit. I also really love surfing, so I thought that creating a brand that was sort of centred around the surf culture would be a good idea. So my husband and I talked about a product that we might be able to do better than what's currently on the market, and we decided to create a brand that focuses mainly on poncho towels. And from its inception, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't contributing to the tons and tons of fabric and textile waste that gets thrown into landfill every year in this country, which I was really surprised about learning how much that actually is. So we came up with some ways that we might be able to reduce our footprint, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit later in the panel discussion. But even though we're a really small business, we've really tried to focus on making sure that we're not contributing to textile waste or any other waste for that matter, like plastics, packaging, all those sorts of things. And also trying to upcycle things and offer a repair service on the products that we sell.
And Marion, would you like to share us a little bit about your background?
My name's Marion Matthews. I have a studio in Port Fairy called Stitch Textile Studio. I've been a textile tragic probably all my life. And I now make predominantly things made out of recycle. So I make a lot of large patchwork quilts made out of recycled Japanese kimonos, which is just the most exquisite fabric to use. And in terms of recycling, the kimonos are sort of the ultimate of recycled. They're reused for generations. They're all unpicked and then they're laundered and then they're restitched again, and the worn pieces are put into places where they'll, won't be worn next time. So the fabric is cycled around the garment. But it's quite interesting in the Japanese sort of culture, a lot of those kimonos weren't really valued. Once they'd sort of got through the life cycle, they weren't really treasured, and there was lots of them being sold very cheaply, and they became a really cheap source of fabric for me to buy. And my latest obsession is eco-dyeing, so buying from the op shop and recycling those woolen garments and dyeing them with U-clips.
Beautiful. So let's start with the discussion with the problems that there are in the textile industry. Naming overproduction, quality, and consumers' love affair with fashion, and also changing over their wardrobe. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen the Foreign Affair article, news report over COVID called "Dead Man's White Clothing," but the overseas industry as well. Did you guys would like to say come in? And do you want to, sorry, Kylie, do you want to share what you've learned so far? Because you're quite new to the industry, being coming from nurse, where the rest of us have probably lived and breathed it for quite some time. What was the most shocking thing that you learnt over the last couple of years?
So one of the things which I touched on earlier would have been the amount of textile waste that's actually produced in Australia alone, let alone the rest of the world. And I'm sure we're not the biggest one.
Maybe.
Are we?
I think we're per capita. I think we're up there.
Okay.
Yeah. So just for you guys, it's estimated. It's only estimates. It's really hard to track that we're sending 6 tonnes per year. That's every 10 minutes to landfill. Every 10 minutes, which equals to about 23 to 31 kilograms per person every year that we're sending. So that's massive.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things I can talk about is production in Australia versus production overseas.
I think that's a really good one.
So I guess my perspective tonight is very different to these 2 amazing ladies sitting next to me. I'm not really a sewer. I can sew a little bit, and I did in the beginning of this business actually do a little bit of sewing myself, but my skills really are not up to par for commercial things. So when we first started, we really wanted to have everything Australian made, and I quickly learnt that that would cost an awful lot of money, and that we don't actually produce any fabric in this country, and unless you want to order copious amounts, like rolls and rolls and meters of fabric, you'll basically pay retail, which is really, really expensive. And toweling is really expensive, because initially I wanted to also start off with cotton as a natural fibre, which was also more difficult to source than something like microfibre, which is what we use now. We do have a mix of both. We have some cotton and some microfibre. But it's probably a long, complicated story that we don't have time for now, but after a long amount of research, I did find a manufacturer in Geelong that was willing to make them for us, after I had a few local sewists help me out with making samples. And I took the samples to the manufacturer, who this was sort of at the beginning of COVID, where everyone was panicking about their business and how they were going to continue on. And they looked at the samples and they're like, yes, we can do this, no problem. This is the quote per garment. And everyone was happy with that amount. And we got halfway through production and they basically said, we're not finishing this because it's not sustainable on our end financially, and our accountant has said you need to give us this much or we're not finishing the job. So in the end, I sat down and had a really good think about it, and I thought, well, I'm not going to play this game and go back and forth with you, because they weren't willing to budge at all. So I just said, well, give me all of our things, which was half finished, and I brought them all back here and thought there's got to be another way to finish this off. So I was lucky enough to know somebody who's, I don't actually know what you call it, but she makes canvas covers for utes and tradies and stuff. And she had industrial machines and she was willing to help us out. But in the end, the cost of producing these towels cost more than what they were originally going to cost if I had have just let the original manufacturer continue doing it. So the whole first lot of towels that we made, which we actually designed ourselves, we sourced the fabric from an Australian business, which actually gets their fabric from overseas, but there's nothing you can do about that. They end up costing us, like, we didn't make any money at all because the cost of production was so high. And when you're producing something like a poncho towel, there's obviously a rooftop on the amount that you can charge for these, because they're not a premium product as such. It's just a practical product that everyday people need. So I think that's something we have to factor in. And it was really disappointing through the beginning stages of the business that particular aspect that we really wanted to work in the Australian production just was not a feasible option. So since then, we've actually gone overseas, and we've got a really good manufacturing company. It's a small company. Their communication is amazing. And we just make sure that we do lots of little things to try and reduce our footprint. So one of those things is ordering really small quantities. So I don't order hundreds and hundreds of one thing. Some things we might only order 20 or 30 units, and we make sure that we're almost sold out before we order the next lot. So we don't have, we obviously are not at the stage where we have a big warehouse, but we're working within our means, I suppose you can say. It's like a slow burn rather than put all this money into it and produce all this stuff that we're never going to be able to sell. So just sort of going with the market.
I would call that slow fashion.
Good. I was going to say, somebody give me a really good definition of what they think is fast fashion versus slow fashion.
That's definitely slow fashion. Can we name a couple of fast fashions for people? Or does anybody want to put their hand up and nominate one of their fast fashion brands? Kmart. Yep. Your Kmart, your Big W's, Zara, H&M.
Supre. Is Supre even a thing anymore?
I think so.
Yes. Or is that closed?
No, I think it's still going. I don't walk into shopping centres very often to know now. Yeah. But even your Country Roads and your Suzanne's, they're all classed as fast fashion. They're all putting garments and collections together, every couple of months, and overproducing and putting them on sale for you. So they're all classed as fast fashion. Some might just greenwash it a little bit better than others. Yep. Quality is also an issue. Yep. You definitely can. Thank you very much.
So I mentioned Fletcher Jones before, and unfortunately quality was the downfall of Fletcher Jones. Because they were so good that they lasted so long. There came a time in fashion that people no longer wanted things to last for a long time. And that saw the rise of fast fashion, and it gradually got faster and faster and faster.
So they didn't succumb to the fast fashion.
No, they did not.
They just lost traction because they weren't selling.
Because their garments were so well made out of mostly natural fibres, which were harder to care for in a way. And things were changing. Women were going to work, they wanted to throw things into a dryer, they wanted to wear something different to work, they didn't want to wear a pleated skirt every day. So things really started to change probably in the late 70s, I'd say. And I just wanted to mention too that I looked at the statistics the other day and saw that 75 million women work in the textile fashion industry in the world. And I also read that very few of them are paid a living wage. So that's a huge problem. And then my mind got thinking about slowing fashion down, and we are at a huge pace with fashion. What will happen to those women if fashion does slow down and they don't have a job to go to? So it's quite a conundrum.
Yeah, a lot of retraining, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, and this is the problem. Like, the last couple of weeks I've been delving into this, not just in fashion, but general conversation. And we are at such crossroads that the future is so unknown, so scary, but there's also a lot of optimism as well. And we just need to grasp onto that and do the right thing, and keep talking about the right things, I think. I don't know about how everybody feels, but I know, especially in Melbourne, where I'm from, people are buying a lot of stuff and not wearing it. And I was even thinking when I visited all your op shops today, I think of all of them anyway, and I was walking through them and I'm going, okay, which ones do I like the most? Couldn't really tell you which one I liked the most. They're all much of muchness, although I did find that the chain op shops, so that sell the St Vinny's ones, I found their garments pretty much the same. All fast fashion, all polyester. I couldn't find many items that I liked to even try on. And they're very similar to the ones up in Melbourne as well. Where the smaller ones I found were a bit more, there's some nice little finds, and they're not necessarily all fashion or garment related. But I was thinking and going, people, I didn't see anything I liked. I didn't try it on. I didn't buy for the sake of buying, but I know that I'm not the norm. And that's what concerns me, is that there's people still going shopping just to go shopping and to buy things. And their wardrobe is full of stuff that they may never wear again. And that's the most concerning. Would you agree? Yeah.
I think it's really interesting watching people go shopping. I mean, I'm not really a shopper unless it's a fabric shop, and then that's a different issue.
The whole day's gone.
Yeah, but it's really interesting watching that whole culture of an outing is going shopping, and I find that a really interesting thing. And looking through, I've recently spent a bit of time in Melbourne and watching people in op shops even going through the racks, that it's really their entertainment, and I'm going, this is getting pretty sad, really. Yeah, but it's quite interesting. What I find really interesting, over COVID started volunteering at the op shop in the sorting room in Port Fairy, and I was just gobsmacked at the quantity of stuff coming in, and that's the smaller of the two op shops. Just huge quantities, obviously coming out of one household, of lots of labels still on, straight from, not even tried on, maybe tried on, not even worn, but quantities of the similar sorts of things. How many grey sportswear T-shirts might you want to purchase? That was quite a surprise. I don't buy a lot of stuff, so yeah, it's interesting.
while we're on that topic of op shops, what was their biggest issue they faced?
Getting rid of the junk. People just use it as a rubbish tip. It's appalling. Dirty, filthy clothes. You couldn't even put them in the rags. When you sort rags, you couldn't even put them in the rags. They just weren't fit to be used for rags. And it's trailer loads that they take to the tip every week.
And that's a cost to them.
It's a cost to them, yeah.
That's a huge cost. Do you roughly know how much?
No, I don't know, but it's a big job for the volunteers and it's a big cost on it too. And they're just totally unsaleable sort of things. Yeah.
And I don't know how many are aware, but prior to COVID, I say prior to COVID because it was a bigger thing prior to COVID because we hadn't had the reports on the issues of selling stuff overseas. And we also didn't have the huge economical shipping costs there are now. But prior to COVID, a lot of the op shops would sell their stuff to exporters. So they would get paid for the stuff and it would be sent overseas and then in bales. And then the overseas people, we're talking, South Africa and those places, would take those bales, sell them on to other little people, and they would sell and try and sell and make money from those clothes and selling them. Now, some of these people were travelling miles and miles and miles to get a bale and then taking it back to their hometown to sell. But for about 40% of that they imported to them was going straight to landfills. It wasn't wearable, either through damage or stains or just so poorly made that it wasn't going to suit their lifestyle to sell. Now, why are we sending rubbish to a third world country that can't deal with it? And then their landfills are going up in smoke because they can't deal with it. Yeah. So it's a massive concern, and I've just written an article on op shops and their place they're not the answer. But the hardest thing is we have recyclers here in Australia, textile recycling here in Australia, but it's not to scale. So the ones that I know, Up Apparel, After is a new one that's just kicked off in Melbourne. Textile Australia is probably our largest. They have an office in Melbourne and an office in Sydney. And there's a couple of smaller ones as well. Now, Up Apparel is the only one that is recycled here in Australia. But my concern there is that we don't have a system set up well for them. What they do is the consumers, pay to send stuff to them. They have it sorted and it goes out to charities. If it's deemed sellable, wearable, that goes out, donated to charities, and they have a agreement with the charities that it's not going to go to landfill, it comes back to them if they can't sell it. And then they recycle the rest of the stuff here in Australia, and they say recycle, I call it downcycle, which I'll come back to in a moment. Downcycle into fluff that can be made into insulation or soundproofing. I talked to Textile Recycling Australia because before Up Apparel chain was doing their own thing, they used to sell socks. They used to be called man rags, I think, and they were a sock business, and they used to have their socks recycled by Textile Australia. And I said to him, what are they doing with all those rags, with all that unwearable textiles? He goes, I don't know. He goes, if I knew, I'd be doing it. I don't know I don't know the company they're using. I don't know if they've got their own shredder. He goes, I don't understand what they're doing. They changed warehouses at the end of 2020 to 21 to bigger premises. And you look at all their feed, their social media feed, and their warehouse is covered in textiles. So I question whether I like what they're doing and I like their ethos, but my concern is it's a red cycle. Yes.
So it's really interesting. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot of stuff as a business owner from tonight, so it's really good. But I have used apparel a few times.
For your leftovers, for your unsellables?
Yep. So you actually pay a fee for them to come and pick up a large box of stuff, and you're supposed to get a voucher to get some socks. I think it is. I didn't get them, but I haven't sent anything to them for a little while. But recently, I noticed that they've started putting boxes into retail stores as a drop-off point. So I don't know exactly how that works, but whether or not you can just bring in any fabric offcuts to any store, or whether it has to be things from the store, I don't really know. But one of the interesting things I thought is that they actually said they're accepting wetsuits now, because wetsuit recycling is a difficult thing. I know a couple of I think Rip Curl does wetsuit recycling, I think, maybe Patagonia, I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a really difficult thing to recycle, and there's obviously a lot of wetsuits around that. And I think people that have been surfing many, many years always say wetsuits used to last a lot longer than they do now, and you're lucky to get 1 year out of them now, and the seams are all tearing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that's quality.
Yeah.
The brands are so built on a system of making money that they're cutting corners.
And these are from brands that are marketing themselves as more sustainable, and they're offering you a better price point because the wetsuit's just all black, and it's there's no fancy logos or anything on it, so you're getting a better price point. But yeah, I don't know. The quality's obviously not there because they only last probably a year. But I feel like this stuff is just that classic rabbit hole kind of thing when you're trying to do good things with your business and you realise that the thing that you've been doing maybe isn't a good thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, things like you want to use this type of fabric, but somebody's like, oh no, they need a heap of water to make that, or this one's made out of recycled bottles, but they'll market it and say that it's made out of recycled plastic bottles, but what's the process that they're using to actually recycle the bottles?
And then if you look,
And it just-
if you delve even deeper, there are stories through a company called Coursework that do audits on places, and they have been caught in China using selling recycled polyester that's made from bottles, but the bottles were bought brand new and not recycled. Yeah, because the reason why they did that is they didn't have to wash it first. They could just use it straight away. So it's made from bottles, but they weren't dirty bottles or second-hand bottles, they were brand new bottles. So these are the things. The industry is huge. The industry is ungoverned, and it's difficult to walk through every aspect of the industry and know that you've done the right thing. And it's really difficult for the small brands like Kylie and many others that want to do the right thing, but they don't have volume to make suppliers do the right thing because they haven't got the finances to do it. Money talks in this industry. I don't think money talks in every industry, but particularly this industry, it talks a great deal. Of course, that's why you're here.
Marion, you mentioned the trailer loads of clothing that go to the tip. Well, I know it happens, but a story about that is a friend put her jeans in her compost bin, thinking that that's a good place to put them because they're cotton and they'll decompose, and that's the way to go because what else do you do if they've had it and they can't go to the op shop? Well, about 6 months later, she was digging in the compost bin and the jeans were gone, but there were all these stringy bits in the compost, and she thought, what's all this stringy stuff in the compost? Then she realised it's the elastane in the jeans that doesn't decompose.
No.
So my worry is that all these things are going into landfill and they're not going to decompose because there's so much, plastic and other fibres that aren't compostable.
No, so in your garments, even if you buy a 100% cotton garment, majority of the time it will be made using a polyester thread, because your polyester thread won't break down and tear like a cotton thread. Cotton thread to sew with is terrible. You ask any sewer and they don't like sewing with cotton thread because it just keeps breaking all the time. So a lot of our garments are 100% polyester thread. So you're going to pop if you do compost your cotton, you're going to have all this thread in your compost. Yeah.
So I think that recycling is a huge problem, and I know with other textiles they can be, as you say, partly cotton, partly something else, and I know some of the something else's, they still don't really have a way of, recycling them properly, or separating them from the other parts of the textile.
That's right. Of course.
I know that some of the large American manufacturers, Land's End, which is a big mail order company in America, they have stopped using elastane in all their t-shirts and trousers, which is a pity because they fit me better. But they make, because of the fact that it will break down, the cotton in the trousers or the t-shirts can be broken down. And see, I do put, we try to wear only natural fibres, and anything, I try to cut up t-shirts and that and put them in the compost, and they do break down. But I've got a sample here of a jumper that got moth eaten. And for a start, it says 100% wool, but of course you can see quite simply that wool doesn't stretch like that. But what would the Warrnambool Council's attitude be if I cut off the elastane and put this out in the photo bin? Because I think we need to look at the local situation, that if you've got a jumper like this with holes in it that you can't use, like a cotton thing, you might be able to cut it for rags. But instead of putting that out to landfill, which will of course get eaten, but if you cut off these things then they have to go.
It's
Give
a
it
very
to me and I'll die and patch it.
Okay, solution right here.
There's holes everywhere. And
That's what slow
Patching's
mending's about.
trendy.
Patches and slow mending.
well,
Yeah.
but what's the council's attitude to people putting old cotton linen?
You have raised a very good question. I have an answer for you because I have spoken to a council about this. So it's not a local council, it's Mitchell Shire, which is not in my shire. But I know, she said their Virgo company, or their company, waste company that takes all the green waste, can recycle or recycle or whatever their cotton and wool and silk and so forth. But their issue is when the green waste comes through, that goes through a sorting. Now, if you put cotton in, you might know it's 100% cotton, but it hasn't got a label on it. They get it. They don't know. If they trust that it's 100% cotton, fantastic. But what happens if Jane here puts cotton, she thinks it's cotton, but it's actually cotton poly, and it goes in the system, and it ruins the whole system. So that's their problem. They can't trust the people to do the right thing. And when you're looking at fabrics, we can't know without the label what exactly it is. So with your jumper or any garment, if it's less than 5% in it, so you've got elastane in your cuff, they don't have to mention that, because as an add-on, it's not in the fabric, it's an add-on, and it's less than 5% of the garment, so they don't have to list it. So you know because you're educated, but potentially other people won't know. Yeah, so in theory the Virgo can do it, but there could be cause problem and they just get upset.
And the other issue with the labelling is that the labelling I've found is incredibly inaccurate, because I'm dyeing with eucalypt leaves or other things, and so if it's a pure wool, it should just absorb the colour. And even old blankets, that like those old white granny blankets, I call them, a lot of those have something else in them because they don't take the colour. So they've probably got a lot of cotton in them, I would think, because they're too old to be polyester. So they're labelled pure new wool, not at all. So the label is not all that accurate. So I don't know where we're going.
Like, there's so many pitfalls, and can be quite depressing, and we haven't got any answers for you. But I think it's not so much giving you answers, but opening your eyes to the world that we're in, and trying to offer suggestions to navigate the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was just fantastic. I know the topic was fast fashion, but I think if we, given you're here with towels, because you sort of like, oh, I'm going to do that. But I think growing up here and coming back here after 40 years, in Melbourne I was involved in an organisation called Roots for All, which repurposes and recycles sport apparel.
Yep.
And I've been involved in the sports sector for some time. And I just think about when I was growing up here, if you just look at football or netball, you know, you wore the same uniform every year until you grew out of it, or until it wore out. And, you know, whereas all their sponsors have got, oh no, you've got to get a new strip every year. And it's not just the big franchises, it comes right down to every
Grassroots.
team. And so it really made me start, and then in fact then it becomes so expensive for families to have all their kids playing sport and, you know, all the other issues. But I thought just doing stuff like this and people asking questions, I mean, we're all mums and grandmothers here probably, and our kids and grandkids would all be playing sport, and even things like if you're involved in a committee, say, we're not going to get a new strip every year. We love our sponsors, let's just get a patch.
Yeah,
and
I love this conversation because I went to I know Boots for All, I'm quite friendly with the Joe and the team there, and we went to a sports conversation about circularity and so forth, and one of the problems that we discussed was this whole branding and sponsorship and so forth. And it's not just our local leagues, it's across everything. You know, you go to the Australian Open, you go to the cricket, you go to the tennis, and they're giving away merchandise and caps and lanyards, and everything has got branding on it. Now, it's all well and great, you might wear it for a week after the event, or you might wear it for football or whatever. But what happens when you don't want to be walking around with big post office sign on your head, or NAB or something? But these businesses won't support these programs and be sponsors of these programs if they can't have their logo out. So what other options are we going to do to also real patch on? And then it comes down to labour, and that opens, as we kindly mentioned, opens a whole can of worms. And it's having these conversations now. Should have been happening 10, 20, 30 years ago. But if we're having them now, we can start changing habits and changing the way we think of things. And it's
into our regional combos.
That's right.
Regional cities.
Yeah.
Don't have to deal with all the
Exactly. And understanding the true cost of things. Like, we don't understand the true cost because we're not factoring in waste. It comes down to it. Go to the $2 shop, buy it for $2. That's not the true cost of it. One, we haven't paid the person that made it properly. We haven't paid them properly, or they haven't made it properly either. And then we haven't factored in waste. I did mention before I come back to downcycling. I don't know if any of you guys want to answer that, but there's 3 types of sort of recycling. We've got repair and upcycling. We've got downcycling and we've got recycling. Does anybody want to have a go at answering those? Sharing? So we've got repair upcycle. I'm pretty sure that you guys all know that. You take something, get it fixed, or create it and make it into something new. Downcycling is like taking a product and doing something to it, make it less. So turning garments into rags. Turning garments into insulation or soundproofing things. And then you've got recycling, which then turns into a whole new product. So your recycled plastic bags and such, it turns into pellets that gets then made into your chairs and furniture and so thing. that sort of thing. So when we're talking about garments, where recycling is quite difficult because what are we turning it into? Apart from downcycling is insulation, but recycling, unless it's polyester and nylon, it can't be made into another thing unless we're doing yarn to yarn or, recycle it back into yarn, which is problematic. I'm sure you all know about pilling. Does anybody understand why pilling happens? Shorter fibres, exactly. So if we're recycling wool or cotton and making it yarn to yarn, our fabric is going to start pilling more. Yeah, because we've got a shorter yarn.
And you have to use energy to recycle.
And we have to use energy and stuff as well, yeah.
I'll try and give it a go.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what they were again?
So we've got repair and upcycle, downcycle and recycle.
So we've probably tried to give all of them a go and to see what works. So I've attempted to repurpose, I guess, a couple of things. So some old towels that didn't sell, we cut down and made them into custom surfboard socks. And a friend of mine, Renee, who used to live in Koroit, had moved over to Tasmania pre-COVID and has just recently come back to Victoria. She is an avid sewer and she was involved in a similar type of thing in Tasmania where they're repurposing old garments into new things. And she's looking at starting a business in Geelong. And we've had a discussion about us using some of our thick cotton terry that we've got left over from our original lot of towels. So this is going back like 2 years ago. I've still got all of this fabric at my house because I don't want to throw it out.
Every textile is precious.
And we've got this idea that we will work together and she's going to make some bags out of them with, I don't actually know what type of bag you'd call it. It's not a satchel, but like a
Tote bag.
No, sort of like a sports bag with like a really sturdy handle.
Yep.
So that's something that we're working on as well.
Duffel bag.
Yeah. And in terms of all of our fabric offcuts, I don't know if everyone can see, but down the bottom I brought a couple of our towels with us and there's a tiny little towel in front. So these are our Geo towels and they're made from all of the fabric offcuts. So whatever's left over from our poncho towels, the manufacturer cuts out these 30 by 60 squares and just overlocks the outside and just sends them all to us. And they're so handy. They're just like a tea towel, so you can use them in your kitchen. You could take them to the gym or take them camping, whatever.
Yeah.
They're good for cleaning glass. Yeah, just for what you could use them as a burp cloth.
Yeah. When production is made, so the very first time, 20% of the fabric lands on the cutting room floor. That's your first waste, which is huge. Unless you're doing, what's it called? I had brain fade. Zero waste cutting. Have you got experience in that at all? No. So zero waste garments are oddly shaped garments, so that it uses every piece of the garment. Every piece of the fabric. So there's no waste at all. But to get there, we've got to treat our body like it's flat, and we all know our body's not flat. So these garments are a little bit unique. They do look beautiful on certain body shapes. I just thought one of the biggest things that I feel that we're not educated well enough in, I sort of joke about that we all should go to finishing school when we're young, so we learn about ourselves. and what suits our body shapes and our hair colouring and our eye colouring and our skin colouring. Because if we knew that, if we were so in touch with our bodies, we would be buying garments that suited us and not what fashion dictated. And your wardrobes would be smaller and you'd be getting more compliments on the way you look because you're dressing for you. Do you agree with that?
It's also the issue that when you look at a new season of clothing coming out, there will be certain colours in there that very few people can wear successfully, like a lime green or a yellow, but it looks great in the rack. And so you go to sale time and what you see, all of those colours, like, yeah. I mean, it's us as consumers who are asking for the new season to be there and the new style and to buy and to consume.
We're asking, but only because we've been conditioned to ask.
Yeah, it's a two-way. Yeah.
And social media.
Social media.
Yeah.
I blame marketing. Marketing has ruined us because they keep their job is to sell a product, and then the businesses use marketing to do their job. But then when they want, if they, like Fletcher Jones, fantastic product, they didn't bend to the fast fashion world, so they closed down. I remember a story where Mum bought a new blade for a lawnmower, and the guy that sold it to her, he said, now, when you get home, just ask your husband to weld a little bit of it, a little thing in this little hole here, or this little chip. She goes, why? Because the manufacturers have designed that little chip because previously to that chip, the blade would never break. Now, that is so uncool. But from a business sense, it made money. I've lost where I was going to go with that.
It's called building obsolescence.
These conversations are meant to be organic so that we're learning more. We're all learning, but you guys are all learning as well. So I'm going to open up to the floor. If there's any questions, statements.
But do you think, I feel like it all started with us baby boomers because we fairly austere childhood, post-war, you had your school uniform and one good outfit in those days. So when the 60s happened and the 70s, this is bloody fantastic. And, music and magazines were aimed at us and sort of like just crazy.
Fast food came in, tin can food came in. Yeah, I know, but it all happened at once, didn't it?
It did, and it was just sensational. But we ended up being the biggest generation. So, and we probably passed our passion on to our kids and stuff. And it's been I feel like it's almost been a hunter-gatherer thing as well. That's going to shopping, could get a thing. And I just now, us boomers, we're dying out. Do you think it will change that top end population die out? And it's
It's more millennials than Zoomers.
Yeah. Well,
It's more millennials than boomers.
yeah. So the 20.
Is it going to, populations,
I
it's going to
think
get younger.
they're way worse. They're way worse than boomers and Gen X consumption because they've been targeted.
I believe the 30 to 40 something. So I'm in that generation. Are big on consuming.
Yes.
Huge. I can't even understand. I'm not, as much as I'm in that generation, I don't understand it because I come from a family that was very thrifty and so forth. So, I'm a country girl myself, so I totally get where you're coming from. They're big on spending, they're big on show ponying and being a magazine style house and living that magazine style lifestyle. But the 20-somethings, they are going to change the world.
Well, they're never going to own a house. So.
No, they're not going to own a house, they're not going to have kids, but they are so They are much more sustainable. Let's use that word, very generalised word, but they are much more focused on being sustainable than any other age group at the moment. And then our primary school kids and our high school kids coming through, if they get over the COVID issues, they're going to be amazing. But we need to make those changes and understand what they're going to be facing, I think.
In the 80s, the government ceased all import tariffs. That's what closed down the clothing facilities.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
All that machinery, you try and buy some machinery.
You can't.
Was all shipped over to India, China, Vietnam, in Fiji.
Mm-hmm.
They had huge populations with huge unemployment. They worked for pittance, and that's why we're swamped with all this cheap
We are. Agree.
clothing. So until value, quality is again valued by the purchasers, I don't know how this is going to stop.
I don't know how it's going to stop either. It's really hard to understand the true cost of things, and there's such a big difference to a true cost that's made in Australia and a true cost that's made over in any other country. Like, if you compare their base wage, like a fair base wage, not not being underpaid, is huge different to our base wage. Like, our base wage is around $20 to $25, depending on what union you're in. But theirs is, like, in China, I think it was $4 or something. We can't. It's really hard to work out where we're going to be and understand true cost and bring back in an industry here to Australia when we're a global world now. So there's also that to factor in as well. And there's no true answers. I think it's really, really difficult.
I followed the Scandinavian fashion industry online, and they are really trying to set themselves apart to, the whole, the runways and the fashion houses that have their crazy shows every year, and to be part of the Stockholm Fashion Festival, you have to be sustainable.
Yep.
You've got it, and it's like a really, really high percentage of reused materials. And I think because they're a bit like us, they're a higher wage country, network of countries, and they're not large countries either, so it's probably something that we can learn from them. But there's an organisation called Ethical Clothing Australia too,
Yes.
so it doesn't mean you're going to solve everything in terms of the reuse, but at least you know that the workers have been paid properly.
That's right.
I think that's the thing with kids thinking more. They're thinking about the environment, but also thinking about children in the third world and making sure that what you're wearing is not being made by child slave labour.
That's right. And I think they do a lot more work in schools for them to understand cost of things as well. Like, when we go to school, it was reading, writing, arithmetic, yada yada. We didn't go down to, being your own. There's a program called Be Your Own Boss in high schools, and primary schools do a very similar sort of thing as well. And they're starting to learn those values now. Like, we weren't taught those values in primary school. So,
We were at St Anne's.
Sorry?
We were at St Anne's in Warrnambool. They were those nuns. They taught you everything, including tanning leather, and spinning and
amazing,
and dyeing and knitting and crocheting and everything. And it was and like even making sandals and belts and things with tan sheets.
That's amazing.
And leather. And it was kind of like, these nuns didn't want you to have to rely on a bloke or capitalism. And so they taught us actually how to
bring them back
for ourselves. I mean, they might have then said, if you're a smart girl, just do teaching and nursing, but, none of this is perfect. Yeah. And I reflect on them a lot more fondly now than at the time.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like, if we're teaching our kids every step of the process now while they're sponges, they will get it when they're older. Like, I grew up in a world where my parents were their own boss. So being my own boss comes naturally to me. But then I have these people that before my brand, so I didn't even give you a bit of background on my story, but before I did what I'm doing, I was in the production industry and I was in production. And I joke that I used to help create waste and now I help solve the waste. But my background is have my own business. Now, when I was supporting small startups, they had no idea how to run a business. But that comes naturally to me. Our kids are going to be able to run a business. The kids going through high school now, a lot of them won't have a traditional job. Or if they have a traditional job, they'll also have a side hustle. This is what we're looking at for our future. It's very different. Way up the back.
I think bringing up the side hustle culture really good. I think people enjoy just how engaging it is to have a side hustle. But the sad reality, I think, also is that it's becoming necessary to afford life and the base needs in life. Which then, to someone my age, I know a lot of my friends, the idea of then forking out the extra dollars to live a sustainable life, it's not feasible.
No, I agree.
That's a massive issue, that the sustainable options that are already limited are not affordable.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think in Australia, as much as we're the lucky country, we're also a country that ends up paying a lot more for our stuff. Whether that be junk stuff or sustainable stuff. I sometimes think that we are paying a special tax that we're unknown for, but I also wonder how much businesses are putting a markup on things. I just did some shopping online to get some supplies for my workshops, and I was buying things from America. They haven't arrived yet, so I'm hoping that they do, but they're coming, well, I think they come from America. I have no idea where they come from, actually. And what I was paying them versus what I'd pay even if I went to the likes of a wholesaler here was huge. And it was coming straight from America, or wherever it was coming from. So I question a lot of things, and being able to afford the sustainable option versus, just the high living costs we are now, it's scary.
Can I talk to that as well?
Yeah.
It's an interesting point in terms of affordability for consumers, but it's also affordability for the business owner. And for a business the size of ours, like, some of those sustainable options are just not achievable. And then you look at other similar businesses who are marketing and selling these products and saying they're made from this and, it's a sustainable process to make them. And then you look at how much they're charging for the product and you're like, how? How are you offering that for that price and saying that you tick this, and this box? Like, I feel like I've researched that and I just don't understand how they're doing that.
No.
And in terms of the labelling that you were talking about earlier and saying there are certain parts of the fabric that aren't listed, that it's just transparency isn't there. And I think that maybe when people are sort of like, well, I don't know what the answer is to this, because it just seems like it's a never-ending. It's like a merry-go-round that you're on that you can't get off. But perhaps the next lot of generations from sort of our era and below, that maybe the answer is that the business owners just become more conscious about what they're doing, and it becomes less about profit and more about being conscious of what you're doing. That there might be less businessmen and more business women. and more conscious people that are more conscious about how much things cost and where things come from. Like, I know there's a big resurgence now of like vintage or upcycled products, and people are sourcing all of this stuff to sell in stores, and they're charging premium prices for it. But I guess if you look at the positive part of that, is that they're not buying something newly produced, they're buying something that's reused. Like
The op shop's got a run on TV just recently. Did we see that? The op shops prices have all gone up. Although I did notice that Lifeline op shop prices pretty good, $5 for top, not bad. But op shops prices have been going up gradually, and particularly chain stored op shops prices are higher than other smaller ones. But they are now competing for all the teeny boppers. I call them teeny boppers, but then we're talking about 20-somethings that are buying from op shops and selling it online, like the case of Depop, and I think there's a few others as well. Because there's this, you know, it's trendy to have op shop clothes and second-hand clothes. Yep, and op shops are going to have to are facing that as well, and their costs are going up. And I also believe that once the baby boomers are no longer volunteering, that we're going to have an issue with volunteering as well, and that's going to have a trickle-on effect. And I say that, I don't mean no disrespect to volunteers or anything, but the way that our society is changing is that our generations are going to be doing good through our life now, rather than waiting to the end of our life and retiring and doing good, because we're going to be working till we're 75, 80, and we're not going to be wanting to do much after that. We're going to go away on holiday if we can afford it. Yeah. That's right. And there's less volunteers every year. Yeah. So, and you know, that's going to push the cost of things up as well, because we're now going to pay wages to run these things. Yeah.
Oh, but I don't know whether anyone has seen online garments from the Katie's group. They own all sorts of
fast fashion.
And in fact, they are the biggest fashion company in the world.
Wow.
Through all their shops. Now, you can go into a Katie's store and you see a nice jacket or top, $79.99. Now, all the time they have these incredible sales where sometimes they're just 3 hours. You know, looks up on my Facebook and that, and you know, 5 garments for $50. And a friend of mine actually went into, because she knew that I bought a couple of things cheaply online, she went into the Katie store here and she saw a top for $79.99, and she went outside and she went on the phone to the Katie's online, and it was $30. Now, I bought them even cheaper than that. I bought a garment that says it was $79.99, and they're not supposed to lie about that. Cost it out $12, $15. Now, what sort of markup are they making on the garment they buy out of China? If they're selling them at $79.99 in a shop, and they're selling them online and still making a profit at $15.
I've tried to get answers for that as well. So when I worked in a company that made things to go to Target, our markup that we sold to them was around 40 to 60%. And then they had their markup as well on top of that. Now, when I spoke to a friend that worked at Suzanne's, she said they would try to get anywhere between 60 and 80% markup. If it got 80%, that was really great. But then you talk to more of the independent brands, and they are wanting 200% markup. Now, I don't understand. When I'm doing business, I'm looking for 60% markup. That's going to cover my, on business costs and give me profit to continue growing my business. But it's not obscene amount. But that's the 60% is a normal bit, sort of, that's my tax man, my husband, said 60% is your minimum that you want to make up. Anything above that is great, but, you know, anything below that, you're not going to have, it's not going to be a sustainable business. But these other businesses are doing more than 60%, guaranteed.
Yes, and then the shop, we're going to the shop, if they're selling to independent shops, and that's 100% the shop puts on.
That's right.
To start with,
Yeah.
and then when they have a sale, we'll like reduce
in the shop, they've got wages, they've got rent. If they're in the now, their rents are really ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
I totally understand why
I
they.
see why they know.
Yes,
But this was working for a textile company that sold to your company,
Yes.
that sold to Target.
Yep.
And we already marked it up 100% before
Yep.
you even got it.
Well, that's right. So there's so many
Can I say
markups.
something from the creator's point of view
Yes.
too? I used to have my own business in Geelong, DNA Designs, and I often sold to shops in Melbourne, and they were mainly, you know, small boutiques or arty kind of shops. But invariably, they would say to me, "We won't buy anything from you unless we can make 200% markup on it."
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I get that you have rent and I get the, you know, everything else, but when is enough enough?
Oh, that, well,
And how is the creator supposed to survive when they won't buy anything unless they can make 200%?
That's right, exactly. And it's all, you know, it's across all industries. You know, the poor dairy farmers, well, they paid 4 cents a litre or something crazy. Is that right? Yeah, but you know, I don't know if it's a problem in Australia, but it's only in Australia, but it is definitely a problem here. And I'd be interested to know how other countries, you know, run their things. But I feel like we're being cheated. Yeah.
But I think,
It's
you know, in a
international.
place,
It's not just Australia, that's really naive. So-
No, I just
No,
hope.
That's really, I mean, I think we're talking about trying to take local action here, and to say it's a problem in Australia, I think it's.
I don't know what's happening in other countries,
Yes.
but I hope it's not just Australia.
I mean, my family, a family member of ours imports like face masks and stuff like that, medical equipment, and during COVID, and because there was demand all over the world, the manufacturers that were making them could charge what
They wanted.
So in the long run, what are we going to do? What can we all do?
And it's also getting things here, it costs so much.
Just go back on something that was said earlier about placing some of our hope in the next generation. So I'm thinking of my daughter, she's 32, and she's got 3 children. And prior to perhaps being a mother, I would say she was like a high-end consumer. Now, she's crazy about this thing called Warrnambool buy, swap and sell. And so for her newborn, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, she buys and swaps.
Yep.
Bags of really good clothing
Mm.
and toys for $5 and $10.
Yep.
Just what she gets for that is amazing, and then what she passes on for that. And there's a real
Resurgence of that.
flourishing trade in that. Okay, so they're not taking things to your shop. They're doing, you know, the,
Yep. There's a lot more of those sorts of.
And I even noticed more now they're getting into not just the baby clothes and that, but also a bit more in furniture
Yes.
and other things. And I'm thinking that if that's a real grassroots movement that's happening, that's going to be a huge impact on landfill.
Yes, agree.
Instead of going to buy, it would be practically perfect for your child.
Mm-hmm.
And the new toys, it's just this recycling.
Like a library.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot more of those sorts of businesses popping up. And I do see that coming through in our retail trade as well. So your fashion brands, they know that there is a big push for sustainability. They know that their clothing is being sold at a premium rather than being donated to op shops. It's being sold as a premium second-hand product, and they're getting on the market. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll be starting to see in the next 12 months, that they will take back, they will offer you a discount or some sort of incentive to take it back to their store. They'll wash it, they'll hopefully fix up any things that need fixing up and resell it. And they can even, as a consumer, I think it was Iconic, they are now letting or taking photos, and you're able to upload and use their old photos to help sell the product that you bought, 12 months ago. Yeah. On a local level, what can we do at home to help you with your clothing? Learn to sew. Would you agree, ladies? Learn to sew.
I mean, I grew up learning to sew. I don't remember learning to sew. I just, best marks I got at high school. I just learned to sew. So I find it really hard but my two daughters can't sew, my two sons can sew.
Yep. I think out of all the skills apart from cooking, let's take cooking out of it because that's a life skill. Of all the things that we can do around the home, building, fixing cars, fixing toilets, fixing electricity and so forth. Textiles is one of the things that it's the most simplest things to learn, because even if you don't have a sewing machine, you just have a needle and thread, we can fix.
Yeah, and showing and teaching people how to fix their clothes so you don't need to repair, you buy something and it's not right. Well, a lot of people just put that out, but it's all fixable. And so trying to encourage people to fix it and use it and then reuse it again. So yeah, I think it's
and
really
textiles,
important.
Because textiles is all around us, would you agree it's one of the most versatile products we can use?
Oh yeah, because it can be repurposed in so many places. Like I now cut my t-shirts up and use them to tie my tomatoes up.
Yep.
Best thing ever.
Yep. Down here, I've made baskets from rags, and I think you've grabbed a little bag that I made as a bit of a mock-up. That was lanyards. So textiles is so versatile. It's a real, a little treasure if we just change the way we perceive it and learn some basic sewing skills. I'd love to see how many hands know how to sew, just out of interest. A good portion of us. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, just really love to say thank you to Katrina, Anne, Kylie and to Marion for joining us tonight. It's been a really, really fabulous and interesting discussion, and tell the audience were very engaged and had some really interesting questions as well, which was wonderful. As always, if you enjoyed our presentation tonight, please keep an eye on our website. We've got or our social media or in library for all our upcoming events. In March, our next Expand Your Mind is with Dr. Patricia Corbett, who's from Deakin University, and she'll be talking about her experiences of living and working in Antarctica. So I'm actually personally really excited about that one. Yeah, exactly. It's been a bit of a dream of mine to go there. She's over many years she's gone back and done several research projects there, so it'll be a really, really interesting one. So yeah, you can find all of that information on our events page, or you can come and speak to our staff. Following on from tonight's session, Katrina will be with us again on Saturday. She'll be running a workshop around these fabulous baskets. They're down there, repurposing some fabric. Sort of keeping within the theme as well, on Saturday we've got a workshop with Kirsty Williams from Growing Home Permaculture, who'll be talking about, basically giving you a bit of an introduction of what permaculture is all about. We really love bringing these events to you. We love having everyone come into the library and find out something new like we did tonight. So we encourage you to, if you aren't already, become a member of your library. So it's not just about books, it's not just about all the free borrowing. There is so much more that our libraries offer. So the more that we get to see our community in here, the more that we can do, and the more that we know you'd like to see, and we can present to you. So you can have a chat with our staff, or you can go onto our website and check out what's coming up. So thank you so much for tonight. Thank you very much.